Hello and welcome to my pre-recorded video version of my presentation, Reducing Extraneous Processing. We're going to go over some concepts, some theories developed by Dr. Richard E. Mayer, and I'll go over his biography here in a couple slides about reducing distractions in your videos, increasing viewer engagement, increasing viewer comprehension, basically giving your videos that extra oomph, that stuff that it's missing, removing the distractions, increasing the comprehension, and let's just get to it. First of all, just a little bit about me. This is a picture of me and my lovely wife and beautiful girls. Both of my degrees are from Oklahoma State University. I have a bachelor's in multimedia journalism, and I have a master's in educational technology. My wife also works here at the university, as do I. I'm a video production manager for the Spear School of Business. My two girls are currently already here at Oklahoma State University as well. So it's a family affair here at Oklahoma State University, and it even includes our two dogs. The university has a program called the Pete's Pet Posse, and it's a dog therapy program. Basically, it's just a way for relieving stress for our students and staff and faculty. And we have our two dogs, Bear and Hazel. They are here on campus with me and my wife, and we just take the dogs around, let them get petted by whoever wants to pet a dog for an hour or more during events. The events are an hour or more. Not saying students just sit there for one straight hour petting the dog, but it's a great program. It's all volunteer. It does not come out of the student's pocket 1 cent. So it's a great program. It's the largest pet therapy program in the United States. So before we get started, I'm going to show this link for the Google Jamboard. And if you've never used Google Jamboard, I think you're going to be a fan of it real quick. It's just a collaborative whiteboard in this space. And obviously, I'm not going to be able to do it live through a video. But in this space, participants can ask questions. They can get links to materials and interact with their other participants, answering questions, coming up with other thoughts. They can insert materials, they can draw, they can write sticky notes. It's usable by tablet, laptop, any mobile device. It's actually got an app. This link will take you to it, and I will keep this link through every slide, just in the lower left, right? It'll be in the lower left. I'm going to put it in the lower left. So let's get into the presentation. This is Dr. Richard E. Mayer, professor at UC Santa Barbara. A long time ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I signed up for alerts when Dr. Mayer would write something, new article for distinguished journals or new books, whatever. And I quickly learned to turn off those notifications. I even had ones if Dr. Mayer was mentioned, and that was horrific. My inbox just exploded by the next day. So I turned those off. But he is continually writing and teaching through video. And most of the concepts he creates theories about are somewhat obvious in some cases, but this has got the science behind it to prove that what he's talking about works. So he's the one that developed this cognitive theory of multimedia learning, and basically it's you learn more when efficient and effective information is presented and extraneous information is left out. Critical information highlighted and promoting understanding. So I'm a big fan of Dr. Richard E. Mayer, and we're just going to cover one of his theories in this presentation. This is a visual model of his theory of multimedia learning, and this is actually from one of his documents. And as a side note, in the Google Jamboard, I have links to some of these papers that he's written, so you can read it for yourself if you'd like. But this is just a representation of what happens when you are learning through video or a multimedia presentation. You're hearing words, you're seeing pictures, and in some cases, you're seeing words as well. It's going into your sensory memory through your eyes, through your ears, as you see and you listen. And your working memory is going to have about 5 to 10 seconds to organize these sounds and images into a verbal model. And if you've heard of this process before, or this concept, or if this, whatever idea you are learning, you are going to compare it to long-term memory versus what you are just hearing now. You have a very short amount of time to get all of that together to develop some form of knowledge, some record for your brain to remember what you just learned. If there are external distractions, your phone, too much information provided in the video, other classmates, what have you, that distracts you from all that your brain is doing here in this image. So, as an example, we're going to look at this SIM card. You see the words, "This is a SIM card." You hear me say the words, "This is a SIM card," and you're seeing a visual representation of a SIM card. Now, if you don't know what a SIM card is, you have nothing to compare it to. And you're like, please tell me more. What is this SIM card and what is it used for? Why is it important? Well, this is just an example, but a SIM card is what is basically containing everything important in your phone in this little device. Now, it's well, it's not microscopic, it's about this big, but in this visual representation, it's very large. If you've heard about a SIM card before, you're comparing what you knew of a SIM card to this actual image. And if I had had a picture of Big Bird and I said, "This is a SIM card," your brain's going to say, "Hold up a second. I know what a SIM card looks like, and it doesn't look like a big yellow Muppet on TV." So this is just a basic visual representation of Meyer's theory of multimedia learning. Now, Meyer has 3 different instructional goals. We're only going to talk about reducing extraneous processing, but he also talks about managing essential processing and fostering generative processing. Now, what are those two? Managing essential processing is basically breaking down the lesson to its essential, crucial elements and making it simple enough to understand and for the student to remember. Fostering generative processing is making the student think about it in a way where they would generate an idea of how this actually works. They're making a mental example. Like if they were to explain it to someone else who doesn't understand it, they're fostering generative processing where they're thinking, how can this work? How could it possibly work better? How could I have taught it better? This is something I always do when I watch myself on a video or I listen to somebody instruct something. How would I do this if I were to try and teach it? And then, of course, reducing extraneous processing is what we're going to talk about today, and it's basically eliminating distractions from your presentations, from your videos. But that's not all. It's also including specific information about the information you want your students or audience to remember. So, what is extraneous processing? What causes it? What are the effects? And what are the solutions? Well, as you can see here, processing or thinking that doesn't support the instructional goal. So classmates are talking, or the instructor is talking about something that does not necessarily have to do with this lesson, and as you're listening, you don't exactly know, does this have anything to do with what we're learning about, what this lesson is about? It's normally caused by instructional design that is not well thought out, poor instructional design. And the more things you have to think about, the more extraneous material you have to think about, the less cognitive capacity you have to think about the thing the professor, the instructor, the presenter wants you to think about. So what's the solution? Removing words, graphics that are not essential to the actual lesson. Now, it does not mean removing all words, all graphics. That is not the case, as you'll see here. In some cases, it's actually inserting words, inserting graphics that help the learner comprehend the lesson. So there are 5 prongs, basically, to reducing extraneous processing. We're going to go through each one of these theories that Dr. Mayer has created and explain them a little bit better. You may already be using these in your videos if you're using videos to do instruction. Some of them may just seem obvious. Yeah, you should do this. But this is just something to keep in mind every time you make a video, to make sure you're looking at all 5 of these and are we following the coherence principle here? The coherence principle is the first one we're going to get to, and it's really the easiest one. And it's basically that people learn better when extraneous material is excluded. These are the 4 principles I'm going to give examples of, but I don't have an example of this one because it's kind of, I'm going to tell a story, okay? I don't have a visual example. The others are visual examples, but this one, and this may be my own personal bias here, but I'm not that great at math. I'm not horrible, but it doesn't come to me naturally. And one thing that has always frustrated me learning math, and it started when I was young and it went through grad school. When a math teacher would give an example, they would give an example of 1 + 1 equals 2, right? 1 + 1 equals, okay, I got 1 apple and I add another apple, I've got 2 apples. Okay, I've got that. Let's go on to the next lesson, or let's try, okay, let's do 2 + 2. 2 + 2 equals 4. Okay, I've got 2 apples and another 2 apples. I've got 4 apples. Okay, I think I got that. And then the instructor or the teacher would say, okay, we're not going to learn this now, but in the future, you're going to learn about multiplication. And so 2 multiplied times 2 also equals 4. Well, now I've got all this extra material. Multiplication? I can't even say that. What does it mean? And why would 2 different math principles equal the same amount? Why use one and not the other? Well, you're going to learn that 3 + 3 is 6, but 3 times 3 is 9. Now you're gone. Now you've got all this extra stuff that you're thinking about in your brain. This is the coherence principle. Eliminating extraneous material that distracts from the lesson. People learn better when extraneous material is excluded, not included. Now, I'm not going to go through very much of this. I'll include it in the slide. These are just the actual results of Dr. Mayer's principal experiments. They would have computer-based lessons over certain things. So in the coherence principle, they covered lightning, how brakes work, things about ocean waves, the ice age, biology, etc. And then they would compare it to 2 different groups. The control group that had nothing presented to them according to this principle, and then the test group that had the coherence principle in effect. And these are the results down there in the light blue. Okay, moving on, the signaling principle. This is people learn better when essential material is highlighted. Now, this one is probably one of my favorites. It's probably one of the easiest ones to remember to do, and I'm going to give you a visual example of it here. This is one of our professor's courses on sports management, and he kind of gives a little history of New York baseball moving to California in the 50s. And this is the Polo Grounds, or was it the 60s when they moved? Whenever it was. These are the Polo Grounds, and he's discussing how large the Polo Grounds are and how far the edge of center field was from home plate. And I'm going to give you an example of how he initially taught this information and then the signaling principle. So here we go.
You can see the shape of the stadium itself, center field, just I can't even remember the number of it, but it's shaped like a U. So you hit a ball to center field, you had to crush it to get a home run. You can see the shape of the stadium itself, center field. Just I can't even remember the number of it, but it's shaped like a U. So you hit a ball to center field, you had to crush it to get a home run.
Okay, so as you can see, as video producers, what we do is help our instructors in these matters of implementing these principles into their videos. And what we did was just add animation identifying center field. If you never knew what baseball is, you wouldn't know what center field would be and why it's a big deal that it's 400 some feet from home plate. So signaling principle in an example there. Here are the results of the experiments that Dr. Mayer did. 18 out of 20 comparisons, which was a 0.87 large effect size, comprehension scores were better in the test group that had the signaling principle implemented. Redundancy principle. I'm going to break the redundancy principle right now by reading this slide. People learn better from graphics and narration than from graphics, narration, and on-screen text. This one could also be called the death by PowerPoint principle. If you've ever had a presenter or a lecturer or professor just read everything in their slide to you. So you're reading it faster than the professor can, because you can read, most people can read to themselves faster than someone can read out loud. And it's just confusing. You're reading, you're hearing your internal voice, but as you're reading, you're also hearing the person that is reading this to you in their voice, and you're seeing their information, and you can see the words, and it's too much going on, basically. Redundancy principle is the easiest one to identify. For some people, it is the hardest one to eliminate, because they want all those words as kind of a script for themselves, and that's just not very conducive to learning. So in this case, here is an example of one of our professors, Dr. Bonsall, and as you can see, it is obviously death by PowerPoint. We're going to go through, I'll show you the example, and then I'll show you an example of how it should have looked had we removed this extraneous material.
So raising capital, financing the corporation. So there are two basic methods that corporation use to raise money. As I mentioned to you earlier, one is debt financing and other is equity financing. So an issuer or a corporate that sell bond means, when we sell bond means when they issue debt securities, it means they are borrowing money from investors. So raising capital, financing the corporation. So there are two basic methods that corporation use to raise money. As I mentioned to you earlier, one is debt financing and other is equity financing.
Okay, so in that first example, those are a lot of words to deal with on screen, hearing, and reading all at the same time. Graphics, most likely, in addition to this, would make the problem even worse, compound the problem. In this case, simple bullet points in the slideshow make it much more easy for the reader/learner to understand what the professor is talking about. So that's the redundancy principle. Here are the experiment results, if you will. 13 out of 13 comparisons, the students did better in the comprehension scores. So, I mean, that one's obvious. It would be shocking if there was a group that actually did better with all of those words just blasted on screen there. Okay, spatial contiguity principle. Now we're getting into the more complicated named principles. But placing on-screen words next to the graphic or part that it's referencing helps people learn better. Again, seems obvious. not exactly put into practice very well. Again, this is Dr. Finch. He is our sports management professor, and in this case, he is talking about the Cleveland Browns, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Baltimore Colts, Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland game. It was called A Tale of Three Cities, basically. And he's talking about when Baltimore bailed out of Baltimore and moved to Indianapolis. And then Indianapolis or Baltimore loses their team. Indianapolis is happy they have a team. Fast forward a couple of years, Cleveland, their team gets moved from Cleveland to Baltimore, and Cleveland is sad. They don't have a team. Baltimore's happy again. They do have a team. And what we did in this example is the professor simply had a bulleted list of what happened, 3 bullet points basically, but there's no spatial reference for the student to reference exactly what happened. It's very confusing. So in the first example, it's going to be what the professor initially spoke of. And in the next example, it's going to be how we made a visual representation of what he was talking about so that the students could learn more efficiently.
The summary. 1984, the NFL's Colts, who are an old franchise, they had great success, had a great fan base, got new ownership by the 1980s. Irsay was the owner, decided to move the team from Baltimore to Indianapolis. People in Baltimore were devastated. The people in Indianapolis were excited because now they had an NFL team. 1996, the Browns are in Cleveland. They want a new stadium. They can't get it done. They leave Cleveland and their devoted fans. They move to Baltimore. Baltimore is excited because now they have a team again. It becomes the Ravens. Cleveland fans are sad because they don't have a team. Well, in this case, it worked out for everybody in the end because in '99, the NFL reestablished the Cleveland Browns with an expansion team. The summary. 1984, the NFL's Colts, who are an old franchise, they had great success, had a great fan base, got new ownership by the 1980s. Irsay was the owner, decided to move the team from Baltimore to Indianapolis. People in Baltimore were devastated. The people in Indianapolis were excited because now they had an NFL team. 1996, the Browns are in Cleveland. They want a new stadium. They can't get it done. They leave Cleveland and their devoted fans. They move to Baltimore. Baltimore is excited because now they have a team again. It becomes the Ravens. Cleveland fans are sad because they don't have a team. Well, in this case, it worked out for everybody in the end because in '99, the NFL reestablished the Cleveland Browns with an expansion team.
Okay, so you can tell that we really like the color orange here at Oklahoma State University, but I think you will agree that the visual representation of what happened versus just a couple bullet points on a slide made much more sense for you as a viewer learning this lesson. Okay, spatial contiguity principle. Here are the effects, the experiments that were done, the groups involved, etc. 8 out of 8 groups were better. The scores were better for 8 out of 8 groups, which is a 0.79 large. I would think that would be much larger, but like I said, I'm no good at math, so we're just going to keep on keeping on. Temporal contiguity principle. I'm going to break the redundancy principle again and just read this. People learn better when corresponding narration and graphics are presented simultaneously. Now, again, obviously, but a lot of people don't do that. Let's take a look at this example. And what we did is highlight areas of the stadium that Dr. Finch was talking about in his course, talking about marketing for the team, where they put the logos, where they put concessions, where they put the higher price seats, where they put random advertisements, etc.
So you've got to have an area to have sponsorships, and it's got to be a digital area, and you have to have that pre-planned so you can sell that in your stadium to make some revenues back. Obviously, you have to sell tickets. Obviously, you can make money on your naming rights. That's part of the stadium design where you have the area for the name of the stadium. You've got your television and radio area. You've got to have that covered. So you have coverage of your sport and your team. You've got to have concessions, which is a huge issue now.
So again, the graphics coincide with the narration and are identifying the parts that the speaker, presenter, instructor is speaking about. This is also the signaling principle and spatial contiguity principle as well. Not that you can only have one at a time, but when it comes to what you're speaking about, you want your graphics relating directly to whatever it's talking about, coinciding with that narration at the same time. You don't want him speaking about it and then later on the graphics showing up. Oh, by the way, here's where concessions are. Well, if he's not speaking about concessions, if he's not speaking at all, you've got to do a lot of work mentally to think about, okay, he was talking about concessions, so that's where concessions would be located, and this would be the reason you would want the concessions in this area because it's a very popular area or populated area in the stadium, but what else was he saying about concessions? It's a lot of work for your viewer to understand, comprehend, remember. So here are the test scores, experiments done, etc. There's us a nice large number, 1.30, 8 out of 8 comparisons. The group that was the test group did much better than the control group would have done without this principle implemented. Okay, so now what? This is what I give to our professors who will watch this and think about what we're wanting in our videos. So the first thing is to create your videos. It's kind of just like a rough draft, right? And think about what you want presented, create the video, and then the second part, and this is the most important, and this is the part that nobody likes, is to watch your videos, because nobody thinks that they sound like how they sound when they actually hear themselves speaking and they're not inside their own head listening to themselves speak. But it's crucial, just like a performance artist in anything else, acting, music, etc. Watch your videos, look for tics, look for bad habits, look for things that you don't know that you do. I always give the example, when I was in high school, there was a fellow student of mine that would click her the roof of her mouth after every sentence she read. She had no clue she did it, but for all of us listening, I couldn't understand what she was reading out of the book because I was always concentrated on when Carrie was going to. So she would read a sentence like this, and then she'd go to the next sentence. Here we go with another sentence. Oh, look, I just clicked my mouth again. It was very distracting. So what you're doing when you're looking at your videos is looking for distracting elements, not only with maybe tics that you have as you present, but bad habits, bad presentation technique that you have in your videos. And then look for these concepts that we've talked about. Managing essential processing, we didn't get to, obviously, and fostering generative processing, but those are the two elements where you're adding content, encouraging learning. Reducing extraneous processing, in many cases, is removing distracting content. And that's really what the extraneous processing concept is all about, is removing those distractions, not only your own personal tics, but removing content that is confusing to your students. Let me see, I think that's about it. I think it is. I've got all these extra slides. Okay, that is my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, etc. Here's my contact information. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.